97.1 QMG and 1510 WEAL, our sister station. Good morning, family. Another weekend is upon us, and it means it's that exciting time to get the word out as I, Renee Vaughn, welcome you to another fantastic weekend edition of Community Focus. And thank you for your fantastic company. You can hear Community Focus on 97.1 QMG every Saturday and Sunday morning beginning at 6 a.m., and likewise on our sister station when you listen on 1510 WEAL. Thank you for your company there. You can tune in Saturdays beginning at 7:30, Sunday mornings. The program begins at 7:10. Let me, Renee, begin by saying good morning to another new member of our Community Focus family. She's got her smile on. She's already lit up the room. So we're good to go. As our topic of discussion this morning is going to be on estate planning. And I want to say good morning to attorney Debra Jessup. Good morning, my dear.
Good morning. Good morning.
So glad to have your company. You got your radio voice on. You good to go?
All right, I'm ready. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here as well. And a very short title, that being newbie. And to just say, let me officially welcome you to the Community Focus family. So glad that you have taken the time because we really are going to cover a very important topic of discussion. And one, Deborah, that we certainly hope will involve a lot of audience participation. So, family, I'm bragging on you a little bit this morning that in the course of our conversation, feel free to give us a call. In fact, that's why we have Deborah on the program to answer your questions, in addition to the ones that I want to ask you this morning. So let me go ahead and open up the phone lines. Our studio number is 336-680-9710. So, Deborah, you're a member of the QF family, so that means you're just welcome back anytime.
Okay.
But you're welcome. Let's get our conversation started by asking what exactly is estate planning in a nutshell. That's probably the best way to start Community Focus.
Well, basically, estate planning in a nutshell is creating a plan to transfer your property. Mm-hmm. And I like to say you're transferring your property to the person you want to or people you want to,
right,
when you want to, in the way that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that in advance. So that's really what estate planning is in a nutshell. It's more than just a will. We'll talk about that a little bit more specifically. It's a combination of documents. I advise clients to meet with other business partners. Mm-hmm. So it's really just a strategy. It's an overall plan for transferring your property.
And two key words that you mentioned in that explanation, Deborah, that I think is really key. First and foremost, planning. Something that it really takes the time for the individual parties involved to sit down and say, this is exactly, especially if I'm the person that wants to transfer that property, whether it's to a relative, whether it's to someone very close to the family. I mean, all the situations and scenarios are different. And then you said strategize. That's another thing, because usually when it comes to estate planning, a lot of times we kind of wait until something unfortunate happens within the family. Usually by that time, the person with which the property wants to be passed on to has already passed away or is deceased. And so the planning stage gets a little bit more complicated because we don't know exactly what that person had in mind. And unfortunately, that's when everything gets a little bit crazy because everybody comes into it with their own thoughts and own ideas to it. So to have that plan in place, and especially to talk with that individual, even if it's not the appropriate time for it to happen, you still want to have that information passed on so that all parties involved know exactly what to do when the time does arrive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you really have keyed in on the most important components about what I'm saying is advance. You want to do this before you need it.
Right.
And the other thing that I want to impress upon, your listeners is that it really is more of a journey than a destination.
Exactly.
Estate planning is something that you do over time.
Right.
It's something that you need to update, review.
Exactly.
It's also something that younger people should do. I tend to think that...
Can you say that one more time?
It's something that younger people should do.
Exactly.
People think, well, I've got plenty of time.
Right.
I'll do it after I retire.
Mm-hmm.
And, certainly you should do it if you haven't done it.
Right.
But personally, I really think estate planning is just as important, if not more important, for younger people.
Exactly.
And we'll talk more details. But I think, if you have small children,
mm-hmm.
You're working, Because the most important thing about estate planning really is providing for the people you love.
Exactly. That's an excellent way to put it.
And that's a lifetime thing.
Exactly.
That's not just,
right.
After I've retired.
Exactly.
And, worked for 35 years.
And when you think about it, too, it's removing perhaps two of the biggest components. It's removing the stress of the situation, and very likely it's removing the burden, too, of
Absolutely.
what could happen because, we know that situations and circumstances, unforeseen circumstances do happen. And we don't know what's going to happen to us from day to day. But the comfort and even in a lot of sense, the security of knowing that we've had this in place so that if something unfortunate should happen, again, we go back to that keyword plan. And the scenarios with which you just gave, Deborah, I think that really answers my second question, why estate planning is so important. You are doing it for the ones you love. You are, in a real sense, providing a protection for them as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are protecting them, and you're providing for their care.
Right.
If you're not there
exactly.
to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that does give you peace of mind.
It really does. Absolutely. Now, why, or who rather, I should ask, should have an estate plan?
Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should have an estate plan. And that's one of the things that I try to start the conversation with.
Right.
Is that there isn't anybody in, your community that doesn't need some portion or some component
exactly.
of an estate plan.
Right.
I mean, even people are surprised when I tell them that even college students need, a couple of the documents that we do.
Right.
I mean, parents are surprised to realize that, when that 17-year-old turns 18
mm-hmm.
and they walk out the door,
mm-hmm.
they're considered adults.
Right.
They're protected by privacy laws.
Mm-hmm.
Their doctors can't talk to you.
Ah.
So they go away to college.
Right. Good point.
I'm even telling some of my friends, well, let's just draft this little quick, HIPAA form.
Exactly.
That allows the
mm-hmm.
doctors to talk to you about your child. They're 18, they're an adult.
Right.
We don't think of them that way.
Right, exactly.
But the rest of the world does.
Yeah,
so
that's
even
true.
someone that young,
yeah.
There are things that we need to put in place for them.
Exactly, because in a real sense, they're transitioning into adulthood. They're not quite there yet, but they're really close to knocking on the door there.
Right.
And it's key to be prepared for when that moment comes, because traditionally the next step is, after school, perhaps there's marriage, wanting to start a family. And of course, as their parents age, that important role comes into play as well, because a lot of times, and we don't think about it, it's like you said, roles start to reverse. Parents have taken care of us for so many years, and then comes the time when we become the parent, if you will, in which we take care of our elderly parents or senior members of our family.
Right.
So really important to have that conversation. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're emphasizing that you really have no age limit on this. In fact, perhaps the younger you are and the sooner you do it, even if you are past the youth of your prime, still the fact remains that if you have had this conversation before, now is the time to act on it.
Absolutely. And what I hear from people when I'm talking to them is, well, I've been meaning to do that.
Right.
My wife and I, we've been talking about doing that, and they never quite get around to it.
Exactly.
And as you said earlier, then something happens.
Right.
They don't have a plan in place.
Exactly.
And now, to put it simply, now we have a problem.
Exactly. And if you think about it, picture this a lot of times, or picture the situation in which you see that safety net.
Absolutely.
What's it like when you don't have one and you're free falling in this particular situation? What do you do?
And that's the problem. They come
Exactly.
to my office, and now it's more complicated.
Exactly.
Things are not going to be honest, things are not going to go as smoothly
right.
as if we had a plan in place, if we had a will,
right.
if we knew where all the documents were. I'm working
right.
with someone now, and, even in just starting to process the estate, this individual had a will, but we can't find anything.
Okay.
We can't find the life insurance policies.
Right.
I even had a situation where we couldn't find the will. They thought their dad had a will, and we've not been able to find it.
To locate
and
one.
so what we're having to do with that one is we're actually having to to go through. I'm trying to reach out to other attorneys.
Right.
We may wind up, we found a copy, but now you've got a much more complicated process.
Right.
And you know, Renee, I wanted to speak to something that you said a little while ago about, you know, younger people, you know, and transitioning to taking care of your parents.
Right.
You know, what I try to do is no matter where I find myself in the process, if I'm working with someone who has older parents, then I talk to them, and then I say, you might want to talk with your parents
About that, right.
If I'm talking to the parents, I say, you might want to talk to your children.
Exactly.
So I kind of think of it in the nature of twos. It doesn't matter whether you have a two-year-old daughter,
Right.
whether you're 22 and you have a 22-year-old college student, or
Right.
whether you're 62 and you have a 2-year-old granddaughter.
Right.
At every stage of our lives, you know, we need an estate plan.
Exactly.
And it looks differently
Right.
depending upon where we are.
Exactly.
And so that's why I say it's more of a journey instead of a destination, because wherever you are, you know, every couple of years you need a transition.
Exactly.
And I tell my clients, you know, every time there's a life event change, you should call me.
Right.
But if I don't hear from you, I'm going to call you every 3 years.
Exactly.
And just
Just
say,
to kind of check up on you
let
and
me
see
check
how
in.
things right.
Everything is everything okay?
But I like how you say that is a journey, because we are transitioning from different stages of our life, whether we're that newborn or whether we're that senior adult. And incidentally, we're finding that so many seniors are living a little bit longer than typically, you know, when our grandparents or even great-grandparents were coming along. But the fact, too, and I like what you just mentioned earlier, is that everybody needs to be involved in that conversation. The 2-year-old may not quite understand what's going on, but still, whether it's 2, 22, 62, every member of the family needs to collectively sit down and say, especially for the person that wants to carry out this plan, and for that person to say, this is what I want to have done. This is what I want to take place. And I want everyone closest to me to be aware. So if that time comes, everybody's as close to prepared as can be.
And, you know, to that end, in thinking about how I'd like to provide a service, we actually do family meetings. At least I offer
Excellent.
that.
Yes.
So, you know, once we've got your plan in place, you know, your family members are welcome to come in.
Excellent.
We can meet with the person that you've chosen as your executor.
Right.
We can meet with the person that you've chosen as your trustee. I'm happy to give them a copy, explain to them.
Exactly.
So everybody's on the same page.
Right.
Everybody knows what's supposed to happen
Exactly.
when you pass away.
That's right. Everybody has an important role to play.
Everybody. And in talking about our parents getting older, I can't impress upon, you know, your listeners how important this is. I had a call from a young lady.
Yeah.
Her father had become sick and incapacitated, and he'd been placed in a rehabilitation center, and, you know, she wanted to try to keep things going.
Right.
You know, pay his bills and, you know, get his property taxes taken care of.
Right.
And so her question was, I would like to have a power of attorney done for my dad so that I can handle his financial affairs. And so after we talked a little while, I had to explain to her that I couldn't do a power of attorney because her father was now incompetent and was not able to
to make that
sign
type of
the
decision.
document.
Right.
And so she says, well, what do I do? It was a completely different process. It's much more complicated. You got to have him declared incompetent. You got to get an order from a judge. You see how much more complicated
Right.
the process of caring for our parents become
Exactly.
when we don't do estate planning.
That's right. And how important it is that we have individuals like you that we can come to in that matter. So, family, as you're listening to the weekend edition of Community Focus, I just can't encourage you enough. Get your questions ready. I'm so happy, Deborah, to have you here on the program. So let me just say before we go to break that we open up the conversation to you, family, 336-680-9710. Deborah, we have much more of the show, and I have lots more questions to ask you. So will you stick around, hang out with me for a little bit longer?
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Same here. Thank you very much. Attorney Debra Jessup joins me, Renee Vaughn, and thank you, family, for being with us here as well. You are listening to the weekend edition of Community Focus right here and right now on 97.1 QMG, along with our sister station, 1510 WEAL.